Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Sunday night video. This week I'm covering the strange case of Thomas Todd and the attempted murder of Rosanna Todd, which took place in Old Durham in 1868. I hope you will find it interesting. There is very little information about the past life of one of those involved in this week's case, so their backstory will be quite basic. Thomas Todd was said to be around 24 years old at the time the crime was committed, so would have been born in around 1844. His place of birth and parents are unknown. He was a labourer at one of the local collieries and had lived in the Durham area for quite a few years. He had married Rosanna Todd in 1867, and the couple had lived together at Hortonley Spring for most of their married life. However, Rosanna had recently left him and returned to live with her family at Durham. Rosanna Todd was born Fenny in Durham in around 1850 to parents William and Hannah, and was one of at least 6 children. Her father was a farm labourer and most likely occupied a farm cottage on the land where he worked. Rosanna, as said earlier, had married Thomas Todd in 1867, and the couple had lived together at Hortonley Spring. It seems the marriage had not been a happy one, and Thomas had ill-used Rosanna many times, leading to her eventually leaving him and moving back to her parents' home, which Thomas was clearly not happy about. Before we go any further, can I just say, if you do find this video interesting, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. It really is appreciated. And it is also completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money at all, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. After Rosanna had left Thomas, he briefly came to live with her at her parents' home in Durham, but once more he behaved in a violent way towards his wife and was asked to leave, which he did. Shortly after this, he contacted Sergeant Seigel and asked him how he could get his clothes and other belongings back from the house. He was told to apply to the magistrates, but he did not do this. A couple of days later, on September the 1st, Thomas went to Durham to visit his wife. He was allowed into the room where Rosanna was sitting with her sister. Thomas asked Rosanna to forgive him, but she told him she could not. She then asked her sister Ellen to go and find her father and tell him to come in to the house. Ellen had only been outside a few moments when she heard her sister cry out. She ran back inside and saw Thomas attacking her with a knife. He was trying to cut her throat. Both women were screaming, and Ellen tried to pull Thomas away from Rosanna. He then ran from the room. The screams of the women had attracted those in the neighbourhood, and a doctor and the police were quickly sent for. Acting on information received, Inspector Dunn went in search of Thomas Todd. He was no longer in the immediate area and had returned to his home at Hortonley Spring. Inspector Dunn found him in a pub at Copt Hill. He was charged with attempted murder, to which he replied, "Yes, I did it." The knife could not be found, and he told the inspector that he had thrown it into the river. Thomas appeared before the magistrates towards the end of September. He had been remanded several times prior to this to allow his wife to recover well enough to give evidence. Rosanna Todd said she had married Thomas at Sunderland in 1867. She said they had not been married long when he began to ill-use her. She described this simply as unpleasantness and did not go into detail of what Thomas had actually done, stating that their marriage had not been a happy one. She said they had lived for a time at Hortonley Spring. This was where Thomas had lived prior to their marriage. She said on one occasion he had told her she was good for nothing more than hanging or having her throat cut. She said after this she had left him and returned to her parents' home. Thomas had followed her, and for a few days they had lived there together. Things had still not been good between them, and Thomas had attacked her with a poker. After this attack, he had been asked to leave the house and had gone to live in the house next door. She said she did not want to take him back, but he wanted her to return to living with him. She said he often came into the house and caused arguments. On Tuesday, September the 1st, 1868, she had been at her parents' home in Durham with her sister when Thomas arrived. She said he asked her to forgive him, but she told him she would not. She said she then asked her sister Ellen to go and find her father. She said Thomas also told her to leave. He followed her outside and seemed to be telling her to hurry up. Thomas came back inside and asked her to return to living with him again, and she told him once more that she would not. She said suddenly Thomas came over to her with a knife in his hand. He tried to push her down and cut her throat. She said she cried out, "Oh Lord, have mercy on me," and began to scream. She said her sister heard her cries and came running back in. Ellen, she said, tried to pull her away from Thomas, and he let her go and ran towards the door. She said he turned and said, "This is the finisher for you." Rosanna said after Thomas had gone, the doctor and the police were sent for, and Dr. Pratt had dressed her wounds. She had been very ill and weak since then, and she had lost a lot of blood. And she said this hearing was only the third time she had been out of the house since it happened. And when asked, she said she had always been faithful to her husband, and he had no reason to say that she was only worth hanging. She had done nothing wrong. Ellen Fenney said she lived in Durham with her parents and Rosanna was her sister. She said she remembered the night of the first very well. When Thomas came into their house, she said Rosanna told her to go and find their father. Thomas also told her to go and followed her outside to tell her where he had seen her father earlier. She said she'd not gone far when she heard Rosanna cry out, and she ran back to the house. Inside, she found Thomas was trying to cut Rosanna's throat with a knife, and she was screaming. She heard him say, "This is the finisher for you." She said she tried to pull her sister away from him, and he ran out of the house. Rosanna was bleeding badly from a deep wound to her neck, and the doctor was sent for. John Prudder said he was a farmhand at Durham and worked on the same land as Rosanna's parents. He said on September the 1st he had heard cries coming from their house, and he then saw Thomas running in the direction of the woods towards the riverside. He said he went up to the house to see what was wrong and found Ellen leading Rosanna towards a seat. Her neck was bleeding badly. John said he then went to find Dr. Pratt. John said as he was going for the doctor, he saw Thomas again near the water. He saw him throw something in, but was not sure what it was. As he got closer to him, he said Thomas jumped into the river. He said he called out to him, saying, "You have done a bad job." And he asked him why he had done it. He said Thomas replied, "Aye, it's a bad job," but did not say anything else. He said he left him in the water and continued on his way to find the doctor. He said when he was returning, he saw Thomas on the other side of the river running over the fields. Dr. Pratt said he had been sent for on the night of the 1st to go to the home of William Fenney. When he arrived, he found Rosanna bleeding badly from a very deep wound to her neck. He had taken care of her and dressed the wound, but she'd been very weak from loss of blood, and her life had been in danger for some time. However, she was now recovering well. Inspector Dunn said on the night of the 1st of September he'd been informed of the attack on Rosanna Todd. He had then gone in search of Thomas. He had been told that he had crossed the river, but he did not know where he had gone after that. He said he headed towards Houghtonley Spring as Thomas had a home there, and at around 5 a.m. he found him asleep in bed at a public house at Copt Hill. Now I do know there is a pub in this area called the Copt Hill, but I cannot be sure if this would have been the same pub. Inspector Dunn said when he arrested Thomas for cutting and wounding with intent to murder, Thomas had replied, "Yes, I did it. You need not bother looking for the knife, as I threw it into the river." I did not find any details to confirm this, but it seems that the knife was never found, as no knife was ever mentioned or shown to the jury as part of the evidence. No further evidence was given, and the defence said they would reserve their evidence until the trial. The magistrates, after a brief discussion, then committed Thomas to trial on a charge of attempted murder. The trial took place at Durham in December of 1868. The name of the judge was not given. Thomas pleaded not guilty to the charge. As is often the case, there is very little new evidence at the trial from that given at the magistrate's hearing, so I will only include any new details. I did not find any details of Rosanna's parents given evidence at either the magistrate's hearing or at the trial, which I did find slightly odd, as I'm sure they both would have been aware of Thomas's previous behaviour, but perhaps because they had not been present when the attack took place, their evidence was seen as not being needed. The prosecution said the marriage between Thomas and Rosanna had not been a good one. He had often ill-used of her and spoke to her in a nasty, upsetting manner, and it seemed that after his last outburst, Rosanna had left him. Thomas had followed her and tried to live in her family home, but just days before the knife attack, he had ill-used her again and left. There was no clear motive for his attacks. His wife had not done anything to upset him other than to leave him for his poor behaviour, and he said he felt that this was a clear case of the prisoner being guilty of the attempted murder charge against him. The defence, who stated they would reserve their evidence for the trial, did not really seem to have much to say. They suggested to the jury that the details of the case were not clear enough to find Thomas guilty on the charge of attempted murder, and it was, to them, much more a case of grievous bodily harm, the lesser charge. And there was, the defence insisted, not enough evidence to suggest he intended to kill. Now, I must admit I did wonder at his thinking here, as it was clear to me that Thomas had intended to kill his wife. But, of course, the defence was there to defend, so certainly could not say that himself. The jury, clearly not swayed by the defence, retired for a very short time before returning a verdict of guilty of attempted murder against Thomas Todd. The judge then spoke to Thomas, saying, "You have been convicted of doing all you could to commit wilful murder. It is by luck that you are not standing here waiting to receive a sentence of death, which, just a few years ago, would have still been the sentence you would have been given for attempted murder. You had a young wife who did nothing to cause you to wish her dead, and I can see no excuse for what you did." He then sentenced Thomas to 20 years penal servitude. I did not find any further details of Thomas after this date, so I was not able to find which prison he was sent to serve out his sentence or when he was released, but hopefully it was somewhere far away from Durham, and he never returned to where Rosanna lived. Sadly, I was not able to find any further details of Rosanna after this date either, but as she was still quite young, I hope that she made a full recovery and perhaps went on to marry someone who treated her better and had a family of her own. This was another of the many strange stories that I cover, and I could see no real reason for Thomas to wish to kill his wife. They seem to have gone from being married to living in misery, with Thomas being cruel to his wife almost from the start of their marriage, and Rosanna clearly grew tired of this and left him. She does still seem to have cared for him at first, as she did try again with him by allowing him to move into her parents' home with her, but she quickly seems to have realised things were not going to get better for them, and for whatever reason, this was the point when Thomas decided he would seek the ultimate revenge for the loss of his wife and his marriage. I must admit I would have been asking if he had been of sound mind, as his attack and all those previous seemed to have no reason to them at all. Were the jury correct to find him guilty of attempted murder? Well, yes, I think they were. He did admit to the offence, and it had only been luck that the wound to Rosanna's neck had not caused her death, and it seemed clear to me that he did intend to kill her, so I think the jury came to the only verdict that they could. Was the judge right to sentence Thomas to 20 years in prison? Well, again, I think yes, as I think anything less and he may have been out in just a couple of years and may have tried to attack Rosanna again. The longer sentence would hopefully mean he was no longer a danger to Rosanna and she could continue on with her life without him. But what do you think? Do you think Thomas did intend to kill Rosanna? Or do you think there is any small chance that he did not plan to kill her, only wound her, but in a rage when she refused to take him back, he attacked her with the knife without truly thinking what he was doing? Do you think the jury was correct to find him guilty of attempted murder, or do you think it should have been the lesser charge of grievous bodily harm? And do you think 20 years in prison was enough for the crime he committed, or do you think it was too long? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very strange, sad and tragic story interesting, and I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again next week.